Hey guys, I'm Kristen from College Lead. I help students with planning high school courses and extracurriculars and also guide them through the college application process. This is going to be episode 2 in Campus Conversations with College Lead, where I interview current students and recent graduates of different colleges to give you perspective on how you can best prepare for college. And today we have a very special guest, Maciej. We actually went to Harvard together, and Maciej is an international student from Poland working on some very exciting projects right now. So Maciej, could you introduce yourself, and also thank you for being here.
Hey Kristen, thanks very much for this awesome intro. As you said, I grew up in Poland. I went to high school there. I went through like Polish curriculum all the way in K-12. And then I applied to Harvard. I got in. I studied statistics, I'll be happy to talk more about it. But initially, I didn't really know what I want to study, and I applied to the US because it would give me more flexibility and it would allow me to give myself extra time to choose a major. I ended up deciding on statistics, which I really, really enjoyed. After 3 years of college, I decided that I need to decide what I want to do after graduation, and I didn't really know what to do. So I took a year off after my third year. I worked at a couple of big firms internationally in Poland, in Singapore, and in the UK. I came back to Harvard, focused on entrepreneurship, just graduated, and I'm working on a startup right now.
Maybe let's start from sort of the beginning. So you mentioned how you went to high school or even grew up in Poland. What is the education system like where you grew up, and how did you find and develop your extracurriculars? And I guess how may that differ from what we have in the US?
Yeah, so the Polish system is very, very different from the American system. Polish system is more similar to Europe and in general the rest of the world. So you don't really have flexibility in choosing your courses in high school. So in primary school and in middle school, everybody goes through the same program and has the same classes. And primary school, back when I was in college, was 6 years, and middle school was 3 years, and high school was 3 years. Now they changed it so that there's primary school, which lasts 8 years, and then high school, which lasts 4 years.
Oh, wow.
But back to 6+3+3, which I went through. So for the first 6 years, everybody studies the same thing. For the next 3 years, everybody studies the same thing. And when you apply to high school, you apply to a specific track.
Oh, so interesting. You have to apply to high school.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like a mini. So at the end of middle school, you used to have matriculation exams, and depending on how you do, you get placed at a specific school with a specific, like you can say like major. I was placed in with one of the best schools in Poland. It was called Batory High School. I didn't want to do IB. Instead, I went with like a Polish curriculum, and my track was math, physics, computer science. Yeah. So then throughout high school, when you're within your specific track, your primarily courses are from those fields. So like you have more math, more physics, and more CS than other people. And other tracks that you can be a part of are like the humanities track, where you have more literature and history, or then you have like a biochem track, after which you can apply to med school. Because at the end of high school, that's another difference. So when you apply to colleges, the only thing that matters, and that's true in Poland and true across most of Europe, is that the only thing that matters is your matriculation exam at the end of high school. And in comparison to the US, this matriculation exam takes place at the end, and you can only take it once. So pretty much what you do during high school, like your extracurriculars, the grades that you get don't really matter, because the only thing that matters is the test at the end, which is primarily based on cramming. So it's similar to like a Gaokao in China, for example. And then depending on the test, you can get into specific majors at specific universities in Poland and in Europe. And the thing is that technically you can write the matriculation exam in specific fields. So usually when you're in a high school with track in mathematics or track in physics or computer science, you would write a matriculation exam in that specific field. And then in order to apply to a major, for example, to study computer science at university, you have to have taken the matriculation exam in mathematics, physics, computer science, and do well. So for example, if you're in a math, physics, computer science track, you can't go and study economics, or you can't really go and study humanities at college or like law, because
Can you take only one type of matriculation exam?
No, so you can write, there's a one matriculation exam per subject.
Oh, okay, got
it.
In
order to apply to some majors at university, you have to have a specific score from a specific test. So for example, computer science major at university will require you to have taken Polish, which is like a literature class that everybody needs to pass. Then mathematics, like advanced mathematics, advanced physics, and like basic English, for example. Right? So the decision that you make on what you want to do in life is pretty much, you have to take it when you're like 15, when you apply to high school.
Wow.
Because then you're pretty much limited to the matriculation exams that you study and of the subjects that you study in school. Technically, you can still write a matriculation exam in something that you did not do in your high school, but it's much more difficult.
I definitely think that system is very interesting, and it's actually quite similar to what my parents had when they went to high school and college in Taiwan. There was even a test that determined their major, actually, which is kind of crazy. But I'm kind of curious. So it sounds like within Poland, it doesn't, extracurriculars, as you mentioned, don't carry that much weight. But from my experience going to high school in the US and then applying to US colleges, extracurriculars were a huge part of my application. So for you, was there anything that you did differently to prepare for college in the US? And when did you know you wanted to go to college in the US?
Yeah, so I was in a sense lucky, because I have always had a lot of interests, and I have always done a lot of extracurriculars. And when I decided that I want to apply to college in the US at the end of middle school, in the beginning of high school in Poland, which is 10th grade, I already had a huge, a bunch of achievements on a national level that were like a good and solid fundament that allowed me to cater my application towards US schools. So for example, I trained swimming competitively for 8 years, like primary school, middle school, and a little bit of that in high school. And like my best achievement was third in Poland at my in my age category. And I was in top 5, top 10 throughout my entire career. So that was like a very important part that I focused on in my application. And then once I decided that I want to, and obviously I took part in like math and physics competitions at a national level as well, like in primary school and in middle school. And when I decided to focus on the US at the end of middle school, I started talking to people, researching the area, and I realized that it's extracurriculars that matter a lot. And that's why I decided to actually apply to the Polish curriculum class rather than the IB, because I knew that IB is very time consuming and I would not have as much time to keep doing extracurriculars. So then when I was actually able to focus much more on extracurricular activities in high school in comparison to my peers who are doing the IB program. IB program is amazing. I think it's taught at a much higher level than Polish curriculum. And sometimes I do regret that I didn't go through it, because then I would have an advantage in college. I would be able to take more advanced courses. But then again, if I had taken IB, I probably wouldn't have as much time to build my application. That would allow me to get into Harvard. And obviously IB is amazing when it comes to applying to other schools in Europe and in general, internationally, outside from the US. But the US is very specific in a sense that it doesn't prefer IB over non-IB. It has the same requirements regardless of what curriculum you're a part of.
Oh, interesting. So that means that you did not, okay, so you didn't do IB, and I'm guessing you didn't take AP exams, which again are standard in the US education system. What tests did you take to get into or apply for American universities?
So actually a really fun thing is that the Polish matriculation exam, or in general, like your international matriculation exam, doesn't really matter. Because in Poland, at least, you take it in April of your senior year.
Oh, that's too late.
in May of your senior year. So I wrote my matriculation exam in Poland knowing that I got into Harvard. So all my friends were angry at me because I didn't take it seriously.
I don't think anyone would have.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So the primary objective of taking that exam is not to do very poorly so that Harvard would rescind my admission. But fortunately, I did pretty well, so that didn't happen.
I'm sure you did great. Yeah, no, that's the same thing for AP exams my senior year. A lot of seniors just did not take them. And especially since Harvard actually doesn't count many APs unless you hit a certain number so you can get advanced standing. It really doesn't matter what APs you take. Yeah. So I just didn't take more.
So actually, to answer your question, I had to take SATs at the time. I know this system is slightly different now, like some universities stopped requiring SATs, but back when I was applying, it was 2 SAT subject tests and the SAT, the main SAT test. I know that some people can take the ACT, and on top of that, you also need to submit a test, a TOEFL score, which is a foreign language. And I think the requirements are still pretty similar. You need to have like more than 100 out of 120. Like if you have above 110, that's pretty good.
So I guess for any viewers I have who are international students, possibly in Europe or even in Poland, what advice would you give them on how they can differentiate themselves as an international applicant to prepare for American colleges?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. And I think it wouldn't really differ from applying as an American, in a sense that you still need to show the same skills, right? Like Harvard doesn't look at you differently because you're international. Harvard looks at you in the same way. So you have to have good grades, and you have to have a good test score, regardless of where you're applying from. If you're international, the standards for your SATs are usually slightly lower, unless you're from China, where you have to have really, really high scores, or South Korea, or Singapore, or any of countries in that region. But at least from Europe, your score doesn't have to be as high. But then definitely you need to show that you have some passions, and I think like having a passion is the most important differentiator. You have to show initiative in something. In my case, it was on the one hand my background in swimming over the period of a couple of years. Then it was my academic achievements, because I've always had like really good grades, and I took part in like math competitions at national level, as I said before. And finally, I did a lot of social initiatives in high school. I ran a small like social project that was educating people in terms of their legal rights. I did organize the largest MUN conference in Poland back in the day. It was organized by my high school historically, and I was like the only non-IB student that was organizing it, and I was one of the two coordinators doing that. And I did debate a lot. And then when I was applying to college, I obviously included all that in my application, and on top of that, I had to submit essays. I think essays are very important for internationals. I guess they're important for everybody. But in the essays, you really need to show your like how passionate you are and like how you don't. It's very confusing for especially international students because we're not used to writing an essay in that way.
Oh, interesting.
So when like usually internationals would like first have a first try at their essay, like instead of writing a typical personal essay that Americans are used to, they would write, oh, my name is Maciej and I achieved this and I achieved that. So like they create a sort of like a second resume or CV.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what, because we don't really do that. There's no requirement like that. So that's like actually a very difficult part for international students. So if you're able to draft your personal essay in an American way, you're already at an advantage.
This question I actually even got from a lot of students I've talked to, but what is financial aid like for international students and what scholarship opportunities are out there and how do you find them?
Yeah, so that's actually a part that is not amazing because there are two types of schools in the US that you apply to. There's a need blind school and I'm talking to those people that can't afford to go to college in the US without a scholarship. Obviously, if you can afford, you don't even care about the financials. But if you can't afford because it's really expensive, there are two types of schools that you can apply to. There are schools that have need blind admissions, and there are schools that have need based admissions. So the need blind school, that's Harvard, Yale, and a bunch of top schools in the US that offer need blind scholarships to international students, which means that you apply as an international, you also apply for financial aid, and the school doesn't look at your financial need when it processes your application. And once you get in, they offer you a scholarship based on your needs. And obviously, when you go to Harvard, UPenn, Yale, that scholarship is very high and usually allows you to attend the school without any issues. There's also the need-based. Universities that allow international students to receive financial aid and financial assistance, but they look at your needs while processing the application. So obviously, when you apply not asking for aid, you will have a much higher chance of getting it. So, and I think it's still the case that Stanford doesn't really give scholarships to internationals.
Oh, interesting.
Because I know that all my friends who got into Stanford from Poland, they did not ask for aid, even though they weren't able to afford it, for example. They would like say that they're able to afford it in order to be processed and admitted. And then they would figure out how to get aid after knowing the decision, after knowing whether they're in or not. And there are obviously those schools that don't offer aid at all. However, the process is slightly different when you're an athlete. When you're applying as an athlete internationally, I don't have that much experience with it, but your requirements are much lower for academics and related issues, and then the schools are able to offer you a sports scholarship.
So now moving on to colleges, how did you choose that you wanted to go to Harvard? Were there any other colleges you were also considering at the time?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty similar because I applied to a limited amount of schools in the US, pretty much mostly Ivies, and the schools with like high admissions. And out of those, Harvard was the only one that I got in. For majority of the rest, I got waitlisted. So there wasn't like that much of a choice.
You were forced to go to Harvard. Oh, what a tragedy.
But actually, I got admitted to a couple of American schools outside of the US. For example, there's a school called Yale NUS, which is affiliated with Yale and affiliated with National University of Singapore, and it's in
Oh,
Singapore.
interesting.
But they go with American program, with the American curriculum, and you can easily do an exchange. You're allowed to do an exchange at Yale for a year when you're there.
Oh.
And it's a really good school. It's in Singapore, and they offer scholarships. And at the same time, when you apply and when you get in, they offer you a free trip to Singapore to experience the school. And I applied and I got in and I did the trip. It was really fun. I decided to go with Harvard after all, but I seriously considered the school as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually visited. I was in Singapore last summer, and I
Oh,
visited
yeah.
their campus. It's really, really cool. I have a couple of friends who go there.
That is awesome.
They're having an amazing time. At the same time, there's also a couple of NYU campuses all around the world. There's an NYU Shanghai and there's an NYU Abu Dhabi. I know that both of them offer scholarships. NYU Shanghai offers good scholarships. NYU Abu Dhabi pays you to attend the school.
Wow, that is crazy. But I think
pretty much have everything covered, like everything, and on top of that, you get an extra scholarship. So your financial aid covers your flights, your apartment, room and board, and tuition, and on top of that, you get a scholarship every semester or like every month, that an allowance, as you would say.
That is amazing.
I have a couple of friends who ended up at Abu Dhabi, and they also had a really good time.
Yeah, I think it's great that you mentioned all these programs, because any of my viewers watching can now look into them. Because for me, I haven't even heard of a lot of those programs, and I didn't consider international campuses of different schools. But I think that's also another really great opportunity for these students.
At NYU, when you're at NYU Abu Dhabi or NYU Shanghai, I think you have to spend a year out of 4 in a different location. So you could spend 2 semesters in New York. I think my friend who was in Abu Dhabi, he actually did a year in Shanghai, a year in Italy, I think, and a year in Abu Dhabi and a year in the US. He basically traveled a lot. It was crazy.
Wow. That is the best college experience ever. Yeah. It's so nice. But yeah, I guess now moving to life at Harvard. So you're in a whole new country now, completely different environment. So how did you adapt to the language, the social or cultural aspect of campus? Was it hard, or were you ever homesick or regretted your decision?
Yeah, so I never regretted my decision, but I have been homesick at times, especially now when I'm stuck in the US and because Polish borders are shut.
Yeah.
I tend to go home because I'm still in Boston. But when it comes to adapting, Harvard is really amazing because it offers an international, it's called a freshman international program. So they fly internationals into campus a few days early, and they allow them to have a soft intro to American culture. And then you have the typical opening days, and then you have like regular kickstart of the semester. And I think that was great in the sense that it allowed me to get more familiar, become friends with people who are more similar than me, and like some of them became one of my best friends throughout college. And it's funny because I observe myself that the longer I am in the US, the more Americanized I am, and the more American friends I have. Like freshman year, a lot of my friends were international, but like as I stayed in the country longer and longer, like more and more friends of mine, or like closer friends of mine, were American. But and I guess a huge factor that contributed to that is that the Polish population is very tiny. So I think it would be different when you're, for example, a student from China and there's always a bunch of Chinese students, because then you always have like a safe haven that you can go to and like hang out in like a big group of people. And it's a double-edged sword, right? Because on the one hand, you feel less homesick because you have a group of people that is very similar to you. But on the other hand, like, do you actually get the full experience if you still stick to your roots? So for example, when I was applying to high school, when I was applying to colleges, I applied to the UK as a backup if I did not been able to get into the top American schools. And in the UK, there's a lot of Polish students. Like Poles are the second, I think, largest population of students in the UK, or maybe the largest. And a lot of my friends who ended up in the UK had an amazing time, but it turns out that they pretty much haven't learned anything about the UK culture because all of their friends were Polish. There's like so many Polish people. It's like really easy to like stick with your existing social circle and not step out of your comfort zone. So it really depends on like what type of a person you are, and also depends on the school you're in, because there are some schools in the US that don't really have a high international presence. Harvard has 10% of international students, and like usually there's only 1 or 2 people from Poland per year.
Oh yeah.
I think in terms of China, there's like 10 or around 10 Chinese students per year. But if you were to go to other schools in the US, at some of them, like the foreign Chinese student population is going to be much higher, or like the foreign Indian student population is going to be much higher. So it'll be a bit different depending on the school that you're applying to.
You mentioned how you took some time off from college, and because I know you during college, I know you were able to explore a lot of different internship opportunities there. So could I ask about that experience, and then also maybe how being an international student shapes your internship applications, or what you can pursue, or what you might want to get a job in?
Okay, that's
a loaded question, sorry.
Question is super exciting. The second question is very sad.
Okay.
Because as an international applicant, your opportunities are significantly restricted. When you're studying STEM related fields and when you're applying for STEM jobs, it's much better. But if you go into something unrelated to like computer science or mathematics, data science, it's much harder because a lot of companies in the US require citizenship to apply. So that's actually pretty sad. Like, I can't count the number of times where I would start a conversation with a company, and then a couple of weeks later, after talking to a few people in the company, suddenly somebody would ask me a question. Wait, so would you require visa sponsorship in the future? And I say yes, and they say, sorry, we can't continue the conversation, but you were an amazing applicant. We wish we could have taken you.
Yeah.
So
it's frustrating.
The opportunities are significantly limited, especially with the current administration. It seems to be worsening. So that's one thing that you need to look at, because depending on what you study, it might be hard to find a job after school in here. But to answer your first question, regarding exploring, as I said before, after 3 years, I realized I don't really know what I want to do after school. That I've had a lot of fun studying statistics, but I don't see myself as a statistician. It's more of a hobby. And I have done an internship my sophomore year, but I wasn't super happy with what I was doing. So then after my junior year, pretty much on the spot, I decided to take a year off, and I applied for permission. I got accepted, and then I started applying for internships to do during that time to explore a couple of different fields. And I don't know how much those names will tell high school students, but I have worked in consulting, I have worked in investment banking, and I have worked in real estate, and I've worked at a trading firm.
Probably. For any high school students listening to this, those are the some of most pursued and sought after careers, particularly among Ivy League colleges. So Maciej has checked the box for every single one of those, is essentially what happened.
Yeah, and I worked in Poland, I worked in the UK, and I worked in Singapore. since I was not in the US and I lost my student status for a year, I couldn't work in the US. So that goes back to the first question about how hard is it to get a job in the US. But I had a lot of fun in all those places. Singapore, by far the best food. London, I think by far the coolest city, especially because of the fact that there's so many Polish people there, because it's much more international than Poland, but also there's a part of Poland in there. So that was like probably the most comfortable. But Singapore has amazing food.
Food is always the top. I was asking my brother yesterday why he chose UCLA, and he said their dining hall is rated some of the highest among all colleges in the US. I was like, I don't know if I can show this to my audience. But it is true. They have amazing food, which is unfortunate given Harvard's dining halls. Anyways. So obviously I want to leave time to just see what you're up to now. So now that you have recently graduated, congrats on graduating, by the way, especially with coronavirus and everything that's happening. What are you up to now?
Yeah, so one of the things that I learned throughout my experiences during the gap year is that I really want to focus on entrepreneurship right out of college. And that's why I spent my senior year exploring those opportunities. And I just co-founded a startup this semester. It's called Newspark. And we are bridging the gap between online media and charitable giving. So basically what we do is we recommend charities and charitable initiatives to donate to relevant to the content that you're consuming online. So we're starting with newspapers, but down the line, we want to move to all forms of online content so that regardless of whether you're reading an article on New York Times or you're reading an article on anywhere else, or you're scrolling through content on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, you would see things that are impactful, that are happening around the world, that you can donate to and engage with on the spot. So, for example, right now, one of the most intense topics is the BLM movement. Prior to that, it was coronavirus. Prior to that was Amazon wildfires and volcano eruptions, refugee crises. And we just saw that a lot of people feel really strong about those issues, but actually don't end up supporting the charities and nonprofits and people that are actually trying to fight those issues and solve those problems. So what we're trying to do is actually to bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. I think that is an amazing startup, especially with the social causes that you guys will be able to support. And I guess just one question from me as someone who does listen to a lot of podcasts and also reads a lot of news about different issues that are happening. Sometimes if I read a BLM article, I do want to donate, but one of, I guess, the difficulties for me as a consumer is that I don't know if a particular nonprofit has been verified or is actually going to support the cause. Is that something that Newspark takes care of and will make that process easier for us?
Yeah, we do that too. We vet all the charities that we work with.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the new flow would be if I was reading a BLM article on the New York Times and I really wanted to support that movement, there would be a sort of Newspark notification saying, oh, hey, this is a BLM verified fund that you can support. And
yeah, exactly.
Would it be something like that? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. That is awesome. If any of my viewers want to check it out or get involved or follow you guys on social, where can they find you? And I'll also link this info in the description.
Oh, that's awesome. So you can follow us at newspark.us. It's newspark.us. Our Instagram is newsparkus. Our Twitter is also newsparkus.
That's awesome.
So you need to remember.
Okay, well, that concludes the conversation. So to all my viewers who made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I hope this was very helpful. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you're interested for more content like this. And to Maciej, our guest, thank you so much for your time and also for providing all of these extremely useful and helpful insights. Definitely check out his startup, Newspark, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It was a pleasure. And follows Kristen's YouTube.
Thank you.